Welcome, everybody. I welcome you to the third meeting on this data sharing thing. And I would like to start. No, this is the wrong set of slides. This is the one. Yes. I would like to start with introduction for those who have not been able to participate in the previous meetings. What is the idea? I think the idea is that we would like to make our data reusable. I go over this slide very quickly because it has been presented before. And the idea is not to reinvent the wheel, but to see what is available. So we are exploring existing standards, and what we are interested in is to show successful examples. And if possibly to connect with like higher level communities, like with the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is mentioned on the left side in the blue element, because they also then have like ready-made implementation if like we can connect to their standards. And what like this activity is about to bring together like groups of experts in certain fields and then see whether we extend like these data models or like we roll our own. And one intermediate goal would be to have like a intermediate overview at the UDM conference in Innsbruck. And one possibility is to collaborate on a publication. That's the feedback we got from a group who has been developing data models on rainfall sensors. So this is like also an intermediate step. And I think if we follow the results of the other group, it will not be so difficult. What are we talking about today? The recap. And then we have organized ourselves into 4 different groups. Like one is about sharing flow and water level data, what is needed to do that. The second group is talking about the output of urban flood simulators. Third group is thinking about like CSO spills, among other things, because that's becoming mandatory now in different standards, how to do the reporting of those data. And there's a group actively pushing to harmonize water quality data, because just a number is not really informative. You need to know whether it's like a average sample or a composite one or like a grab sample or so on. And then in the end, we would like to briefly discuss the group organization. And I've just put like indicative times. That's like leftovers from the last meeting. I apologize for that. So we probably have 5 to 10 minutes to report on these things. And if the meeting is finished early, then we just finish early. Are there any questions? Good. So then I just continue, like from the blog that I am leading, like what have we done regarding sharing flow and water level data? So in comparison to last, yeah, that's like the question why we would like to do that. One use case would be to develop machine learning algorithms, right? You can't do that on the data set that you have in your group because you probably don't have like the thousands of water level data that are required to do that. And one use case could be anomaly detection. In the very far future, we could possibly think about data-driven rainfall runoff modeling. So what we had as a result last time is that we were analyzing, let's say, existing standards. One is a standard from the Netherlands. The other is like a standard from Switzerland. And we've been like looking at the different attributes they are suggesting how to store data. And of course, they have different concepts. Like in Switzerland, for example, it's a bit more complicated how they represent like measurement values itself. And then there's a language issue. So what we have been working on is like not just look at the ontologies, but we also pulled in other like sources of information. For example, you see here the IWA Urban Drainage Glossary, where like the words we use in urban drainage, like what is a combined sewer overflow tank, are translated into German and to French and to Japanese. And they also talk about flow measurements and level sensors and so on. Then we have textbooks. One is like the famous book from David Butler. Another one is like the newer book from Jean-Luc Bertrand-Krajewski and François Clemens, who has looked into how we could deal with our data. And the upper right thing is like how a flow meter is represented in the Dutch standard. And there were a couple of other books that we looked at. And then we extracted the relevant metadata attributes. Then I asked 15 experts from different countries all over Europe to comment on these attributes. And we collected the votes on the importance of these variables or metadata attributes. And this is how it looked like. So we set up a spreadsheet. And some of the results are like some of the attributes are quite basic, like a timestamp, location ID, like a sensor ID, then measure parameters like the values, and so on. And we also asked the experts to say what additional information we should collect. And one expert mentioned that like water level is always important, even if you are mainly sharing your flow data, right? So you get much more information from your time series if you also have like the water level data. And this is like the process. And if we look at the results, like the evaluation, like 3 is very high and 0 is like useless. So the experts then said most of the data or of these attributes are important. And like one could possibly discuss whether these ones which have a score lower than 2 or lower than 3 could be classified as optional. Right? Then we discuss whether some of the attributes, like the sensor calibration date, is probably only interested in specific use cases. If you're interested in analyzing the drift of the sensor, for example. And this is probably the main result from last month. The next steps is that among the experts, we would like to discuss the votes and see whether we are already at a point where we could make a suggestion regarding like the mandatory or the optional variables. And then it would be very nice if we could work towards a certain use case, right? Like that everybody brings his flow time series, and then we analyze the data we have in with one script maybe, or with one goal in mind, right? And a very, very simple thing could be a data availability, like just count if you have like 5 minutes or if you have 1 minute resolution, whether you really have 1,440 points in your time series, right? More advanced things would be scatter graph methods, where you could see whether your monitoring site is well behaved or not, or whether you have a hydraulic jump like close to your instrument or so on. And like maybe further down the road would be anomaly detection. So this would be the next steps we would like to work towards until the next meeting, or maybe even until Innsbruck. And that's probably all from my side. Are there any questions?
Maybe not so much a question, but a bit of a comment, because now your ranking is only based on how important it is, right? Because did you also think about how easy different things are to actually describe and keep track of?
No, that's a very good point. No, we haven't. And there were some discussions, like if we really want to go towards data-driven rainfall runoff modeling, right? Whether how much of the external world we have to put into our flow time series, right? Like catchment information or the degree of imperviousness or so, right? Because as you mentioned, if you want to provide the data sets, some of the attributes are not so easy to get, right? But in hindsight, they could be really, really important and then impossible to acquire, right? So I think that's a very good point. But no, at the moment, we have been only focusing on importance.
Yeah, because I think it's important that if you make everything mandatory, you probably start to make it almost impossible for people to actually meet those standards.
Yes. That's true.
I also
Good
have a
point.
comment on that.
Yes.
Yeah, also there is the question of like the current practice on how well people document the data so far. And I think that's question comes with that. It's like we have to kind of to build a practice of having good metadata. So there is maybe we like the question is, should we lower a bit our expectation to until we build a practice and people start getting better, and then we can add more things. I don't really know, but what I'm sure is that we'll need to push a lot to make people use those formats. And
Yes.
another small comment is that you were mentioning like if we want to use them for building rainfall runoff models. I think that is also the question of do we want to do metadata for the measurements, or do we want to build a data set that is fit for developing those rainfall runoff model? I think those two are a bit different. And in the end, starting with having good and well documented measurements is a first good step, but of course they will be needed for more information to build the rainfall runoff models. So perhaps it's in the second step, even though I agree it's also sort of important, but it's hard for now to know which one, because for sure you could build a rainfall runoff model completely overfit to a data set with no more information, but that's probably not what we want. So, yeah.
Yes, that's true. So if I summarize it, you advocate for starting small, but starting complete. Right?
Yeah.
So we should put everything we have on the table and then even accept data sets which just have like 2-3 attributes, for example.
Yeah, at least as long as they kind of acknowledge the other attributes and they say, we don't have this information. I think it's better to know that they don't have it than to have them not really looking for them at all, maybe.
Yes. Maybe a question back to the audience, like what we have been thinking about is like a scientific purpose of data sharing, right? Like, and the big focus is that if we would like to do machine learning, data-driven modeling, we need a lot of data sets, right? Like 1 million is better than 1,000, right? So are there any use cases that we're missing that might be even like better to communicate this? There's something in the chat from Abi. If achieving data that covers all the points is too difficult, but certain data is less relevant. Yes. Thanks for like staying quiet in the noisy environment. Yes, that's true. Like the quality of the data set could be expressed with the completeness of the metadata, right? That's like that's a very, very good point. And I know that Kaggle has, for example, this like description, right? And it's a very high level. And we also have been thinking of like translating this into the engineering domain, right? On the Kaggle side, it's like, does the data have a source, right? Is it being maintained? Does it have a license? Right? But we could also say, look, does it have the flow time series? Does it have a Strickler value, like, or like what we have here, like the sensor calibration date, right? That's very good. Good. Any other comments? So I think open or questions like what we've been discussing in this group is how to connect like these attributes to like higher level data models. Like most flow data are like measured in a channel or like in a pipe or something like this, right? So it would be very nice to have the information on this infrastructure or on the monitoring side, but that's then sometimes covered by other entities in the data model, right? So that goes a bit into the question where to stop, right? Like how much of the other like relevant things, like which are related to the flow measurements, do we have to like provide, right? But that's ongoing discussion, and maybe we know more in a month. Good. Then I would come to the second block, which is like sharing data for urban flood modeling. And there the vision is like also to create fast urban flood models and to have like a good data set for model training and calibration or validation, right? So thinking about a CAMELS type of data set for urban inundation modeling. And there Joao is reporting from his side that he's been able to get some experts on board, like from Serbia, from Denmark, and JBA researchers. And he says there are very strong synergies with like an ongoing project. I think that's from the Serbian colleagues that focuses on data management aspects for flood modeling with machine learning models. And then he reports about the next steps. If I can change the slide, that he is to prepare a first draft with ideas about to manage like these data. And similar as I did it with like the spreadsheet, he will share this with the interested experts. And then his idea about what data to describe the surface, the surface flow, sorry, like could be 1D time series, could be 2D time series. There's going to details about how to describe the reality of the terrain, like with squares or with hexagons, irregular meshes, raster formats. So that's more complex than I anticipated. And then the next thing is to describe the water elements in this, like the flood depth, flood level, and maximum water depth and velocity. And I'm very sure that he also has like some ideas how to represent the rainfall, right? Because sometimes it's spatial, sometimes it's like just a point measurement. And he's asking how to store the data. So one point, which is also relevant for like the other groups, is like where should like these data go? Should we just put them on the Zenodo, or like does somebody have a server where we could put it? And how could this look like? Pointers to data repositories. So some of these are specific to his groups, but like the data repositories, right? That's definitely something we also have to think about. And I think that's it for this part. Are there any questions or comments from the audience?
Maybe about the question that he asked at the end, like on common data repository or pointers to data repository. I mean, I guess that in many cases, people have other constraints in their project in what they have to fulfill or for some reason. So they might want to put it on their own data repository for some other reasons. And then from that sense, I assume that a pointer for some people would be convenient, but other than that, I agree that we should be able to find them all easily on the same. It would be more convenient for the user at least. So I think there is I guess that's why there is the question, because there is a balance between the user and the producer in terms of what is best.
Can you comment on that, Alfredo? Like what we've been discussing, just making a community on Zenodo and putting the data there?
Yeah,
because Zenodo has an API, right, where you can pull the data from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we were working in the CoUDlabs, we realized that there is a lack of labels and tags for the dataset that we uploaded in Zenodo, so it was very difficult to track them. And the other thing that we realized is that there is a connection that you can do to Zenodo to extract the datasets, and we tested this with this platform called Renku, where we had our own environment for a project in particular, and we could connect directly to Zenodo and download the data that it was in a particular format. In this case, it was a zip format. We could extract it, put it in our environment and work with it, and use Jupyter notebooks to work with the data. So yes, Zenodo is quite a good option if the data sets are accessible and the data is findable.
Mm-hmm. So from a technical side, we probably need tags. And if we have a specific task, do you think then it would be easy to find the data on Zenodo?
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't call that it would be the most efficient way, but it will be a start.
Yes. And maybe it's like similar as before, right? Like we should start somewhere. Even if we have like a small use case and can show the usefulness, right? Then we can probably build more adaptive or better systems than further down the road, right?
Yeah.
Good. Are there other experiences regarding the infrastructure?
I think there are a few comments in the chat. Looking at, I think,
I didn't see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you read it?
Yeah, Abby recommend to look at the NCBI genome database for inspiration. Danish mentioned S3 HPC workflows. I think that overall, we're not the first field to try to be better in data sets, and we should get inspiration from also climate sides for what works and what doesn't work. I think it's useful to look at that because other fields have tried it before and some things have not been working and some things are working. So we should manage to get feedbacks from people from those fields maybe directly.
Yes, that is very, very good comment. I have not been really thinking about HPC workflows because that's money, right? Directly. But that's a very good point. Some people also commented that for the standardization, right, we should possibly look for a different organization as an umbrella than IWA, right? Maybe the European Union, because they have to somehow standardize their formats, right, for the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, or maybe other organizations like the OGC, which might have more resources to organize like this. So yes, if like somebody has connections in these communities, please get in touch. I think that's very good. How is it in the geospatial community, Luis? Is there examples where people have set up similar demo cases where we could borrow some code or like infrastructure?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Zenodo is quite popular, I'd say. There are more and more people publishing data through Zenodo, especially here in this more academic or scientific realm. I'm not sure it's really efficient. I'm not really convinced that's the way, because you don't have then mechanisms to access or serve that data. So it's just like a dumb repository. It's nothing more than that. Apart from that, then things tend to be still a bit, I'd say, a bit dispersed. You don't have, at least to my knowledge, you don't have some kind of mechanism that everyone would use. I'm not aware of.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's not so efficient. How, like, what would more efficient mean?
Yeah, more efficient would mean if you had let's say, APIs or mechanisms that make it easy for programmers or data scientists to readily fetch that data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually, some of the work that has happened is exactly around those APIs. And we have this major data sets and data stores around the Copernicus programs and similar things in the United States. And that kind of data has a different challenge, is the fact that the data, that they are so big. We're talking of immense volumes of data that you can't really access the data. Right? If you work at a large enough scale, just forget it. So then the research has been working on how do you compute that data instantly. And so this means that this data access and in this concept of fair data has not been the most, let's say, the field where people have been most concerned with, although maybe they should.
Good. So this API thing, I think that was really useful, right? For me, that also has an organizational component, probably, right? Because if we say, okay, Airwag hosts a server, right? Or like you make a homepage where it's like somebody is curating data sets and people can like access the API of this thing, right? Then like, how do you distribute access to this, right? Can everybody upload data there, right? And
yeah,
at least for the time being, right? If we talk about Zenodo, right, it has like a kind of login, right, like a registration. So like this admin component to it, that's like already covered in a way, right?
Yeah, and the data sets there are meant, but not data sets. So Zenodo was actually meant, I think was meant mostly to store documents. It seems to have evolved around that. And then the data sets, it's this concept, you have this bulk data there in, let's say, in some kind of compressed file, and then you download it and try to figure out what's going on your own system. And this, on the one hand, it requires manual work, so you have no way to access it automatically with some programming. And the other is that it kind of it has implicit this assumption that what people usually call metadata, the actual semantics of the data, is detached from the data bits themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very different philosophy from what we talk around fair data within the cycles of the semantic, like where data and semantics, they are not the same, but they are closely coupled together.
Mm-hmm. So for the flow meter data on Zenodo, you would have a CSV file with like timestamp and value.
Exactly, and then you
but
have
you
to
would
figure
need
out what that value was.
Yes, you need a separate like attached file, or like if you go with the CSV format, right? You need to document the metadata in a separate storage thing, right? Like a separate file. That's what you mean.
Right. That's kind of the traditional approach, right? You have metadata and metadata, and not only in Zenodo, not only tend to have that, but also the fact that you have to access all that manually. So you are expecting a human, some kind of entity, to be able to go through that and that semantic step.
Human entity. I like that.
So if we can, some kind of entity, because these days you never know, right? You never know. But it's I think we can make it probably more objective. In Zenodo, we have the F, the A, and maybe the I, but for sure we don't have the R. Okay, so that's clearly one of the elements that is missing in Zenodo. But then, of course, you have the upside that you can store there whatever, right? And there are no constraints.
Yeah.
For the time being. So.
Good. I would have asked for alternatives, right? If you say, well, from the geospatial community, we have like, as Abi mentioned, or Danish mentioned here, like the spatial IO. But I would like progress, and then maybe we can come back to like these elements like later. Is that okay? Good. Then like if we come back to the agenda, we had the levels, flows and levels, we had the urban flooding stuff, and now is the CSO spill data. There I don't have any input from Alma, except that she is trying to get like the expert group together. And I really found an interesting website where they collected all the data from the UK now, like sewage map, but not more than that. So I think in the context of what we have been discussing is that this is a bit advanced in the sense that the government of the UK provided open data in CSV format. And then some NGOs pulled the data and made like services around this, right? Like some mapping, or they even like made small hydrological models to make kind of predictive, how do you say that? Like for decision support, like should I go into this river, for example, right? So it's a kind of narrow example how you could build services or extract knowledge from like these large data collections, which you couldn't from just one data series, right? And the UK has like a data model, but which is meant for regulatory purposes, right? So it's just the spill duration and the timing and the number maybe, but not much regarding the infrastructure behind it, right? So information on pipes or geometries, or like how large a tank is, or how much has it rained in the area, like this is all not included. But there's a data model what one could work with, right? So also attributes one could discuss. And I think this is the next big thing which I'm seeing, that like these maps, like of how openly provided government data looks like, that this will appear in our field as well. Maybe not for flow data and maybe not for urban flood data, but for surely for like the spill data, because some of the utilities are also thinking it as a value if you report your data in a transparent fashion, right? And the interesting part of this use case is that it is real time. Like the other use cases, we have like some data on Zenodo, or like in a water quality data archive, right? Like and the spill data, it's important to see whether the sensor, whether this combined sewer overflow is operating now. Right, so there also this element of machine to machine communication in real time could come in and could be discussed, which is not so much the case on the other things we've been discussing, right? And this is maybe then also a bit more regarding real world use cases, like practical aspects. Yes. That's what I know about this. So I don't know really what the next steps are, but if we discuss potential publication, this is definitely something which has like interesting elements. Because there for the real-time data, like there's already a lot of stuff available from the OGC, right? Which we could build on. Good. Anything regarding the CSO spill data or the OGC data formats or streaming data? Good. Then I would proceed. And no, that was the wrong direction. Would like to ask Vincenz.
Yeah.
what he thinks about water quality data sharing. And if you would like to share your screen, you're happy to do so.
Yep, we'll share my screen. You have to. I cannot because you're sharing.
Good, then I stop.
Okay, sure. I don't remember exactly what Lena shared with you last time, so I will just go for more global overview.
Basically, the figure from your publication, right, where you had like some colored like columns and like that was what she was showing.
Okay, so then I will go more to the like the overview of that and the next steps and so on. So basically we have that. So what she has shown last time is something we have in an abstract for UDM, and we have also sort of an initial draft for a full paper for the metadata for water quality samples. I think it's relevant to, when we can talk about it later, but it's relevant for some subgroups to have like a publication because it's very specific things, like especially water quality data samples can mean really a lot of different things, different variables, different types of samples and so on. So it's it can be complicated, but I think that anyway, overall, we need an overview of like the different groups we have in the field in terms of metadata, and we need to do that to make sure it's coordinated. Also, in regard to what we were discussing before on the fact that we don't really know where to exactly stop. For instance, sharing samples for water quality data alone might not be very useful overall if you don't have also the discharge, the water level, the description of the catchment, of the different pollutant sources in the catchment, etc., etc. So there is this big question of where where to stop also. So anyway, we developed a preliminary metadata structure by discussions with the people in the emerging contaminant group of the Joint Committee. One thing we want to do, ideally, is to include a few example data sets in the paper, because that would help making people understand how to do it, and also that would help to show the different types of samples, because again, you can have like water quality samples, you can have more effect-based methods and passive samplers, and etc., etc. There are really quite a diverse type of measurements you can take that are really based on different processes and that have different meaning when it comes to use them. So we have quite a few possible candidates to help us with like applying it basically, but of course the time will always be kind of the limitation. So I think we will discuss it more in detail with Lena soon to figure out that. The idea with that, with testing it, is also like to make a sort of second round of review of the attributes we have to try to continue to validate them. And as I said before, what I think is important is that that we have those regular meetings and manage to align all of the different groups doing metadata together. Another aspect, we also have like more continuous measurements. So that's more linked to a project I'm linked to. And the idea is to have data sets submitted by the end of August with StopUp. We have a current version of how far we went in terms of metadata for that, which is kind of compliant with other structures that exist and other standards that exist. But what we're thinking is that it needs to be anyway sort of published online by the end of the project. But in Zotero, you have a possibility to have versions. So what I think we'll try to do is to follow up as much as we progress here with this group to update the metadata so that we have it also as an example. So there's a bit of I think there's maybe
Can I ask a question? I think that's Zenodo, right? Or
sorry.
I also confuse
I wrote too
that
fast.
like
My bad.
I confuse that all the
Zenodo.
time.
No, sorry. Yeah.
Maybe you could quickly fix it.
But
it's like appearing in the recording in the correct fashion.
Yeah. Swoop. I'm just fixing it.
So that sounds very good. Like, what standards are you referring to?
I don't have them in mind, but I think they were linked. I have. Let me just check. We have
comes from the chemical community, probably, right?
Not actually, not more like for some of them. I think in the if I'm correct, in the Dutch ontology there is quite a lot on water quality also. For the one that are for the continuous measurement at least.
Yes.
And then a lot coming also from more hydrology community. So there is like quite a lot of other fields that are a bit connected to us. I can't remember exactly the names. Next time I can bring or I can follow up in an email with the names because I can't remember the acronyms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's like another of the organizational points, right? It would be nice if we have a kind of forum or something like this,
Yeah.
right, where people could discuss these things, right, or write a email. So it's where people could follow discussions like quickly, right? So I think that sounds very interesting, and it also relates probably a lot to the water quality interoperability experiment, right? Like from the OGC. And you say this is like mostly a time series problem?
It's time series of conductivity, turbidity, these kind of things.
Yeah.
Probably the water level part would be separate, but it's the same here. I'm in contact with the people that will upload the dataset. So if at some point we want to update the datasets that are in Zenodo to fit with the structure, you would end up here. That's also sort of possible because I think that we have a lot of datasets that are already existing, and if we want our work to be efficient, we also want to convert some existing datasets to update their metadata in a sense.
Are you allowed to do that?
So on Zenodo, it's possible to versionize if you were the one uploading it, from what I know.
No, I think from a license perspective, right? I think about what was it? The National Stormwater Quality Database from the US, right? I mean, they have like a lot of information in there, right? But are you allowed to do that?
For those ones, I don't really know. But I guess the data owner might be allowed to republish them, or might allow us to republish them in an updated version with different metadata. But that's for sure, like the question of if it's allowed is probably something we should look into.
And if we think about use cases, do you have something in mind which is like easily programmed in a couple of lines of Python?
In terms of like to produce or read metadata, you mean?
No, if you envision that you have your collection ready, right? Or like your example data sets, right? What would be a very simple function that could us allow to test this, right? Like I remember that the Germans had this stormwater quality database where they looked at, I don't know, a couple of hundred publications and took out the value of phosphorus in stormwater, for example, right? And then you end up with a long column with like different phosphorus values. You could possibly ask, what's the 80% quantile, right? Or what's the mean, right? Like, and then if you have an operation that you could apply to your data set, right? Where you could ask your data set like very simple things, right? That as a demo case, right? That could be very useful to work to as the next step, right?
Yeah. But I think that goes back to the question of the platform and being able from a platform to fetch different data sets, right? Or
I think that goes towards like a presentation at the UDM, right? That you show something which is not there yet, right? Whether it's like a mean concentration of some chemical, right? Or like I don't know. That was why I was asking, right? If we talk about developing something, it would be good if you have a goal, and like a very simple use case could bind everything together. And if we bring everybody brings a small use case, then we can think about platforms.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah, and I think I had the last slide. It's more external things, a bit more for the group itself. I wanted to mention, I mean, you're already aware about that, Jörg, but we have like the SPN in Trondheim in 2026, and would be cool to have like something toward data quality in general or metadata. Could be a kind of workshop or hackathon, or I was thinking initially of a crowd-based dataset annotation because it would be nice. But anyway, feel free to suggest ideas, and we should just like at some point, not too late. I can come back with a deadline for where we should decide something, but I think we should use this opportunity because we need to make this idea of improving our data sets sort of live, and we should use those opportunities. The second part is that I think we should also try, I don't know if it's too much for now, but to try to have also metadata for model development. Because again, if we want to use those data sets that we are producing also for machine learning, or if it's for a more typical model we have, we need to make more clear how we develop models, because so far it really depends on authors if hypothesis or the equations used or the structure used is well communicated or not. So we should have something that help people following good modeling practice. So yeah, I talked to a few people that could be interested in helping with that. The question, of course, is if we want to include it now in the group here, or if we want to think about that in a second step. But I think this part is sort of achievable, at least for drafting something, because there is a lot of literature already about good modeling practice. And I think it's in a way also very much aligned with the, like the way you train or calibrate your model is linked to the data you have, and they could also come together on documenting the training of models and the purpose of their use to make sure people use them for the right purpose. Yeah.
Yes, that's very interesting. And you're not only thinking about like data-driven models?
Not only, because I think that the problem is the same if you have a conceptual model, physically based model, or a data-driven model. It's the same problem in documenting how we develop them and how we then use them. Because I think that if you give a municipality a model and say, yes, I calibrated it, they will use it for everything without necessarily knowing for what specific purpose it's relevant. Which is, I think, one thing we need to tackle, no matter if it's data-driven or more physically based, if to the extent where it's possible. Yeah.
Excellent. Any comments? Then I would go back to me sharing the screen.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. My computer is slow. And I think we are like through with the groups. Like what we had is like this group organization thing where we discuss different platforms, right? And the midterm goal. So maybe Alfredo, you can say a bit about what you have been starting.
Yes. I thought it was important to maybe create some sort of, let me see if I can share the screen.
Yeah, then I have to unshare, but that's easy.
GitHub, can you see the screen?
It's building. Yeah.
Some GitHub account for the organization of the International Working Group on Data and Models, and maybe a repository for the UDS FAIR data initiative that we're doing, so we can put like all the workshops here and with everything, the summaries and the recordings and the subgroups, and we can keep building on this GitHub, so any new information can be stored here, also related to the presentations and maybe even your table data, Jörg, and so we can keep all compiling here, because soon we will go from the CoUDlabs into the other website, So I think this is a good starting point to keep everything together in the same place. And other initiatives like the OGC interoperability experiment, they do this kind of like organization, which I think is very valuable. So we can make use of the GitHub.
Yes, I think that sounds very, very nice, because we could also then like merge different base documents, right? Like creating the urban drainage ontology, right? That would be probably the way how to do that.
Yeah, it's a good space for collaboration, and the majority of researchers, they have an idea of how to work with Git and GitHub. So yeah, we can start with this.
Good. Yes, and I think for like developing a small demo case for the time being, putting the data on Zenodo and like setting up a code in the Renko platform would definitely be something, right? Because there we would also have the logins and wouldn't have to worry about like hosting our own server, even if it's like at the moment not so efficient. That sounds good. And then if I come back to this last slide, right, I would say let's prepare the next meeting a bit more in advance. And then I would talk to the organizers at INSWORK, because I had in mind that we had like a workshop slot, but we don't. Like we have a workshop for the CoUDlabs project, but not something for this activity. So I would ask them to get a room at a certain point, right? And probably Monday is a good time point, right? But that's I will look into this. And then the next thing would possibly be like to discuss like how this publication could look like, right? Whether we make one ourselves, or like the water quality group is doing a separate one because it's simply too large, right? And from my point of view, it's also not needed like to get a peer review on this. On the other side, if we're doing it anyways, right, and it's possible to do it, then why not? Right, so I would probably set an example or a rough structure on this on the Git, right? And then we would take it from there. And if like everybody could collect example data sets and work on a simple case study, which we could possibly implement on a joint platform, like computing the mean of like a time series or something. So we also start to work on the implementation. I think that would be very nice. And then I look at the time and it's like 1 o'clock. So maybe time for 2-3 questions or comments.
Jörg, I need to go. Sorry, that's not a question. But I would just like to say, well, see you. I think on the 15th of July, I'm still around, so I will see you then.
Yes, I will be probably on holidays then, but like somebody else will lead this meeting then. That will be fine.
Okay, so I just want to say goodbye.
Goodbye. Good, and then I close the meeting if there's nothing else. And send me all your flow data. Everything you have.
With that, yeah. That's a good way to end.
Yes.
All right.
No, then see you in a month.
Bye-bye.
And reserve the date. Bye, guys.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.